Welcome in. Character Strong here on a Wednesday. How you doing, Corey?
I'm doing really well, Kat. How are you doing? So good to
No.
see you. So good to see people rolling in.
My goodness. Lisa Canterbury. What? Hey, girl.
You gotta love when a friend hits you up right in the beginning. It makes you feel like you're being seen and you're welcome.
Oh my goodness. That's right. Corey, I feel like we got a little entry question as people are rolling in here. You want to?
Sure do. You absolutely do. So in the chat, as you're joining, as you're coming in, where are you coming from? Where are you zooming into? And if you could, what are 4 words to describe how you're feeling today? Kat, how are you feeling today?
Does I count as one of those 4 words? Excited, tired, pumped, and ready.
Those are all good. Those are all good. I got it. Stoked to be here. Yeah, we got some people dropping in from all over. We got Battleground. We've got Houston, Texas in the house. A couple people from Wisconsin, which is great. Oh, someone from Colorado. That's where I'm at. Right down the road in Fountain.
Steve Sharp, what are 4 words to describe how you're feeling today?
I am chilled, feeling chill, kind of tired, and excited. It's cold out here. It's icy and cold.
Monica, what's your 4 words?
I am feeling excited and accomplished and fun and cold. It feels like the air is on in our building today.
As you're still rolling in, don't forget to drop in the chat where you're joining us from and 4 words to describe how you're feeling today. Lots of people from all over the country.
We've got some great representation. School counselors zooming in today. We might even have other people than school counselors. Might have some social workers or school psychs or administrators. We are so glad that you made time to join us today. Housekeeping stuff, Corey, what do we got?
Absolutely. Just a couple of reminders for folks that we're going to be sending out the slide deck after we wrap up today. And so you'll have that. You'll also get at the end of that slide deck a certification of attendance. So if you're needing those for your clock hours, you have that available for you. And it's recorded. So feel free to rewatch this, send it to a friend, share it with all those that you might find this information usable and interesting and tangible for their next steps. And as we go throughout the next hour, please feel free to drop any questions into the chat. We have our Character Strong team members here that are going to make sure we collect those and be able to answer as many as we can, both throughout the conversation and also at the end today.
Well, I am so excited to have this panel discussion today. I'm Kat Pastor. I am a school counselor from Flagstaff, Arizona. I have been in the business for 20 plus years, mostly at the university level and at the high school level. And the people that are joining us today, I have had the honor and privilege of meeting them through the school counseling profession. And this just goes to the idea of relationships and collaboration, but just what a wonderful field that we get to work in. And I'm so excited to have Steve introduce himself next.
Hi, I'm Steve Sharp, pronouns he, him. I'm a school counselor in Lancaster, Pennsylvania at middle school level. I also coordinate our K-12 department. Other than that, I'm really excited to be here with such great company. I'm going to kick over to Corey.
Everybody, Corey Notstein. I'm the Director of Implementation and Improvement here at Character Strong. But before that, I was a district administrator and supporting school counselors across the district, about 25,000 students, and a school counselor myself at the high school level.
And hey, I'm Monica Bryant. I am a school counselor in Las Vegas, Nevada. This is my 8th year in counseling and my 13th in the district, all at the elementary level. And I'm really excited to be here with you all today.
So now you know a little bit more of the day-to-day of what we have an experience in and where we come from. Those of you who don't know me and those of you who know me know I'm a relational person. And so I have this question, we call it hypotheticals. I'm going to pull this out to our panel, but if you feel called to talk about this question, feel free to pop your answer in the chat. Steve, I'm gonna put you on deck first here. If you were to pick one movie to be representative of your life, which would it be and why?
I want to go with Pee-wee's Big Adventure, but I think I'm going with Space Jam on this one, because at the end of the day, I feel like I really have enjoyed, and the things I find most memorable when I've been in unexpected settings with unexpected people, and found some really those to be some of the lasting relationships that helped me to thrive. And I'm very competitive and petty sometimes, just like Michael Jordan, and we have the same hairline.
So like the new Space Jam or the OG Space Jam?
The OG Space Jams. Nothing against Braun, but just saying, the original's always better.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. Monica, would you be willing to speak into this question?
Yeah, absolutely. I always struggle a little bit with these ones. So if you guys are struggling in the chat, I'm here with you, because I am always like, what's one movie from what genre? And I'm super indecisive. But the movie that popped into my head is The Last Holiday with Queen Latifah. Not the terminal illness and all that piece of the movie, but she had that book of possibilities that towards the end of the movie, when she realized she had this terminal, she decided to kind of live life. And so that's what I strive to do every day, just live my life to the fullest, do the things that make me happy, spend time with the people that make me happy, so that once I get to the end of the road, I don't have those regrets of the things that I wished I would have done. So,
yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing. Corey, I know we were talking about this earlier. I'm not sure if you have a movie, but not like any speaking into this one.
Oh, I love so many movies, but I think the ones that remind me of my childhood are probably really representative of sort of where I am. But I've been rewatching all the Star Wars movies with my son, and so kind of feel like I start in the middle and go backwards, just like the movie sequel. So maybe that's more of my life. I'm somewhere in the middle, and I have to go back and remember what happened before. And get to that episode 1. So we're going to go with Star Wars as a ongoing saga, which feels like my life.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think for me, I didn't grow up in the era of Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus and all of the things. Like, to go watch a movie, you physically had to go watch a movie at the movie theater. And I know Steve Sharp and I had a conversation about Blockbuster earlier this year, and just thinking about, for me, was the experience of going to the movies as well. So we're really excited to feel free to use this question next time you get into a staff meeting, or maybe you are in your school counseling lesson. We're going to talk a little bit about National School Counseling Week, because that is coming up shortly in February. SEL fits into school counseling. And so this is just a quote from the proclamation that our American School Counselors Association has put together as one of the resources for us. And I really, I appreciate this in a lot of different ways, because it's talking about the unique contribution of school counselors within our school system, and why and how National School Counseling Week was founded, and the tremendous impact that school counselors have on the lives of the students and our school buildings and our communities everywhere. We're going to just talk a little bit about what those resources look like from the American School Counselors Association. They actually have an entire toolkit that is available. They have some panel discussions that are going to be coming up. They're going to be featuring this year's National School Counselor of the Year, but also our National School Counselors of the Year finalists. So you will drop this information in the chat. If you're not sure where to find this, probably the easiest place to go is schoolcounselor.org. And this year's theme is School Counselors Helping Students Dream Big. They have put together this entire promotional toolkit for you to use. There's social media posts out there. There's morning announcements that you can use. There's certificates. There's a lot of different ways to get involved. So if you are not sure where to start, one of the places to start could be going out to this toolkit in the next week or so and getting yourself ready to help promote, celebrate, and advocate for the crucial role that school counselors play in our schools. I think I might be up with our very first question. So here's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be talking through a panel discussion, and we have 7 prompts to have ideas about how we're going to share those ideas. So how do we move away from crisis response to prevention work on our campuses? Steve, I'd love for you to lean in and share in on this question here.
Yeah, I mean, particularly when we talk about it over the past few years, everything has felt like crisis. And I do want to just call a timeout to all the participants here and really thank you for the work that you've been doing and the sacrifice you've been making to support your students through the range of different issues. But we know really when we look at the national landscape, let alone to every state, we understand there's unprecedented investment when it comes to school counseling because they understand the unique position we are to support students in a range of different areas, including their mental health. And our work as prevention specialists is key to being one of those. I mean, through our comprehensive school counseling programs, we can provide multiple different tiers of support or be actively engaged in these multi-tier systems support. I know like one part, Corey and I got talking about just the other day, we were talking because at least at my school, we had just finished a universal screening for mental health. There are a lot of different things. We understand like school counselors in our roles as far as collecting data, we can actually be instrumental in collecting things like mental health or behavioral data that can guide early intervention, supports, or skill building for students, either when it be in classroom instructions, connecting to necessary services, or in addition to that, to connecting with meaningful relationships with adults or with other students within the building. There's kind of when we talk about like 2 different schools of thoughts. They're either universal screenings for behavior, and these are going to be more often not broad-based. They're going to focus on students like social emotional functioning, social skills or behaviors, but there's also going to be these things called universal behavioral health screenings, and these are going to be more kind of clinical in nature. They're going to focus on high-risk behaviors or symptomatology. In the same way we understand like these broad-based screens for behavior, whether they be like strengths and difficulties or the BEST or the SABRs, like these can be really instrumental again to help to provide to support students' social emotional behavior or academic behavior in the classroom. But we also understand right now where it could be instrumental to plug a child into some behavioral health services sooner rather than later, because we understand nationally access to mental health is becoming increasingly strained. And we could actually schedule out on a day a chance to identify students earlier and then connect them to necessary services before they're in a crisis moment. These could be really helpful too. And these could be like the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale, the PHQ. Our school, we use the behavioral health screen through Drexel University. Any number of these can be very instrumental tools either to provide skill building and connect students to services and tier them in the walls of our schools, or connect them to at-risk students to referral services beyond the walls of our school. And I know like Corey, you had some insights too. I'd be interested to hear.
Yeah, no, Steve, I think what you're talking about is really important to think through. And one of the key things that we often forget to do within our system, and I think we feel it regularly, is what is the capacity that we currently have in our system to meet the given needs that we're finding on these particular assessment instruments. And so oftentimes people are slightly hesitant to actually use an assessment tool because they're afraid they'll over detect and not be able to meet the needs of students. And one thing that we like to remind people of is that tells you 2 things. One, maybe tier 1 isn't sufficiently working in your system. And so what other types of preventative type things that can happen at the most universal level should we go back and rethink, whether that's your social emotional learning curriculum, whether that's strategies that are delivered by the classroom teacher to support students and cue them and prompt them to be ready. So those are all things that we need to really be mindful of as well. And then moving in that idea of what you've already spoken to is really moving students to the ability to identify them, but also triaging who might be needing the most support and when. Is that referrals right out? Is that being able to go into a small group setting that might be run by the school counselor who has the ability to do that? And what often gets missed is that we can tie back our comprehensive school counseling programs right into this work and saying, okay, these things have been identified. Where is our comprehensive programs missing some things? And we can start layering additional things on year after year to make sure we're addressing those things preemptively and moving us away from that crisis mode, because I think everyone is probably tired of just living like with their hair on fire every single day and well, you might be like Steve and I and burnt it off at this point and no longer can grow it back. But that is where we need to move. And I think all of us want to be there for certain, because students benefit in the end because we're being preventative as opposed to responding to their direct need when they're totally in a crisis space.
Yeah, I mean, just as we're shifting out of this, the one thing that I really heard you said, which is something that we can take time to make sure and be intentional and shifting out crisis into prevention mode, is absolutely taking time for resource mapping, understanding both within the walls of our building, the supports and services that are available and or not available, particularly at that universal level. And then in addition to that, taking time to either form partnerships, to provide necessary training to staff, or to develop those programs internally, or to understand the referral process for those external supports. Resource mapping is a necessary tool for us to really make that sharp and distinct shift into making sure we're doing that preventive work. And again, as we understand, our relationships could be the biggest thing. Relationship mapping can be one of those tools in your resource mapping that can be something very helpful. Harvard University has 2 different tools for resource mapping and relationship mapping that can be available just by using the Google machine.
Yeah. Steve, you bring up a really good point. And that brings us to our second big idea about community-based partnerships. And because we're going to need to lean on not just the internal supports, but those that are external from our school. And I'd really love to hear from Monica, how do you build community-based partnerships that last? I think that's the big P. They're not going to disappear 1 year after that connection is made.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Kat hit it on the head when we first started this webinar, that it's all about relationship building. And so I think when you're trying to figure out who those community partners are, you have to be intentional about building relationships, because yes, we have needs and great, it can last for a year. But honestly, if we're finding these partnerships, in order for them to have that longevity, we need to take the time to really build relationships. So understanding what it is that we need from the partner, and then also understanding how we can support those partners so that it becomes this true partnership and not a one-way type of thing. And so when we talk partners, we, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, you've got partners at your schools. So you think your faculty and staff, you think your admin, then you have those collaborations with community partners that are out there, even your students, your parents. So the community really as a whole, anyone is potentially your partner. And so when we're thinking about the whys, like the causes for why we need to collaborate, we look into finding that common ground, like I kind of mentioned before. So I have a need, you have a need. So let's see how we can work them best. And, for us, it's making sure that we have our students in mind. We're there for our students. We're also there for our faculty and staff, but we're mostly there to support the students in our building. So how is this partnership going to impact students in a positive way? And so then we talk about those increased student outcomes, because we're looking at that data. Is it behavior we want to increase, attendance, discipline, whatever the case may be, that we want to focus on with this particular partner? And what are the needs of our students? Because we all know if our students sometimes come with a lot of struggles, and if their families are struggling, what kind of supports can we put into place at school to support them? Because if Maslow's not being met, like the academics aren't going to be there, the attendance is potentially not going to be there, but the discipline parts might be there. So we really getting to the root of it, and what community partnerships can we put into place to consistently help those students. And maybe some of you have social workers at your schools that you can collaborate with to help with that. Maybe you physically have to go outside and find some resources. What kinds of things can we put into place for staff? So do we need to do some annual staff trainings, whether that's you as a school counselor doing it, or whether that's you bringing in an expert if it's an area that you don't feel as comfortable with, finding those community partners to bring in those to bring that into your staff. And then thinking about whatever other resources particular to your needs, your area, that you're going to need, that's going to overall make your school counseling program the best that it can be. And like I said, I think all of this really goes down to relationships, because once I've built a relationship with, let's say, Kat, and Kat's got this great community service agency that she's working for. Now we can work together to figure out how can she's going to bring me in some resources that are going to help my students be successful. And maybe in turn, I'm helping her with a webinar, or I'm helping to bring my insight as a school counselor to her program to help them understand the importance of school counseling, which once they understand the importance of school counseling, they're going to be more willing to come back to the school to pour into the school counseling program, which pours into the students. And that's how you build that that cycle to have that longevity for those partnerships.
Yeah, and Monica, you and I have done this work together ever since I think we first met each other, and this idea around partnerships. And I think sometimes we do feel alone or not supported on our campuses, and we realize that we actually our schools are in communities. Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes people are literally waiting to be asked, like, how can I help? And how do we do that? And school counselors are excellent at finding those collaborative ways for us to help get the resources to our students, to our staff. And what does that look like? And even within our own profession, our ethical guidelines speak into this. Our position statements speak into this. And these are just two quick examples that Monica and I found. We found through the American School Counselors Association. I know she and I both have used this resource, the position statement about the school counselor and school family community partnerships. And then College Board has a new enhancing the principal school counselor relationship. I know all of us feel strongly about the relationship and the partnership between our administrator, because many times the school counselor is the conduit between what's happening with our students, where the resources are in our communities. And it's really a win-win. I think school counselors are perfectly positioned and are trained for a whole child. So when we're talking about whole child, when we talk about the whole school, the whole family, and the whole community, and really build it out from there. And then just thinking about people in our circle, right? To reach out and say, hey, Monica, how have you done this on your campus? And just being able to share that across state lines has been so beneficial to help meet the needs of our students. Monica, how did you get that started on your campus? I know you have a really excellent relationship with your PTA, for example.
Yeah, so in terms of the PTA specifically, honestly, it was showing up to meetings. So the minute they see the staff show up to their meetings, they see, oh, there's some form of investment, like you want to hear what we're doing and you care about what we're doing. And then it became showing up to events, you know what I mean? And it's like anytime that I could get to an event, I would. And so what that translated to was they're like, oh, she cares, she's invested. I would ask them questions about things, or every time they had something, make sure I showed my face. And so ironically, because of that, the staff every year gets so much money to help with their classrooms. And then the second year that I was here, they included me. So they were like, we've never before included our school counselor. So now every year I get $250 from the PTA to be included into my budget so that I can spend money for resources for my students. So it's just a little bit of money, like, that I don't have to worry about. And one more thing that I'll note, Kat, is our communities are families, right? And so we get them invested because the pizzeria down the road went to my elementary school or graduated from the local high school, or their kids currently go there, or their nieces or their nephews. So when we really make it as much community centered, like we're all family, because if my nieces, nephews, my own kids go to the school, I'm way more invested to make sure that school's successful because I went there and that's my alma mater, or my kids are going to go there, or whoever I know in the community is going there. And so that helps to build those bridges too, when they know that they're investing in their own well-being or the well-being of their families too. It helps them to get that collaboration in there.
Yeah, and exactly right. And we're spot on. And I think you hit a key term, well-being, right? And we probably might be more focused on that more now than ever. And Corey and Steve, that leads us into this next idea here is what are some sustainable ways that we can increase the mental health of us as school counselors and the adults on our campuses. And Corey, I'd like to start with you because I know you led this work up in your district up in Colorado. And what did that look like?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, there's a lot of things that Steve even mentioned right when we got on to the call around our own well-being as practitioners, as school counselors, as educators in the space. And we know when we become dysregulated, we equally struggle to help students regulate their own emotions. And in 2021, the Surgeon General came out and released a call to action around youth mental health and the the severity that we're facing as a nation related to their well-being. And then they turned right around in 2022 and released a workplace wellness framework. And I think this really speaks to the idea that one, it is complex. There's not just one thing that a school district can do to actually increase the well-being of staff. And all the little things we used to do, like ways that we gathered, ways that we broke bread, ways that we actually connected, aren't maybe enough anymore. And so how is it that we increase our levels of support so that those that are working inside of each and every building are healthy and well? And what I really like around the Surgeon General's efforts is this sort of 5-prong approach that's centered around worker voice and equity. And it gets down to these protective factors that really allow for us to do this. And some of these things are really concrete things, like when we talk about work-life harmony, right? And how do we actually increase staff's efficacious nature to be able to do things on their own and have autonomy while also having flexibility when how and when they serve their students and in what ways. We're also talking about making this work really meaningful and creating dignity and giving dignity back. And when we think about it into schools, like, there's so much happened during the pandemic around real awareness of what it takes to be an educator. And equally, the opposite side of that is educators are not doing the right thing. School counselors aren't doing the right thing. And it's like, okay, hold on. How do we recapture that as a profession that has dignity and worth? And equally, making sure that our educators are well trained. How do we increase professional learning, especially around mental health and mental health literacy, so they can not only help themselves and their peers and colleagues, but how do they turn around and then support their students? And so many things also point to like protection, right? Not only that around safety and security, but equally, how do you feel a sense of belonging inside your setting? Those are all really key elements that help drive up our ability to actually have a healthy workforce. And without the healthy workforce, there's no way we're going to be able to serve students at the tier 1, 2, and tier 3 levels. We really need to drive into that. There's great resources that you can actually take and do this. And the reason I would say that this is so important is that there's 2 statistics that came out that I thought were really impactful from the Surgeon General, is that 76% of US workers reported at least one symptom of mental health condition that they were suffering from. And the other piece is that 81% of those workers reported they would be looking for their workplace or their employer to support their mental health in the future. And so they're asking and they're equally exhibiting challenges related to mental health and wellness. Steve, but like you're in it right now, right? I'm no longer in those school buildings. You're in a building literally
still
right
stuck
now.
in my office. Help, I can't get out.
So how have you been thinking about this? What has this been looking like in your world?
I mean, it's really tough. I mean, the reality is, whether I see it here with staffing as we replace school counselors and we see it happening, like the reality is there's a wide turnover happening in the profession in all 50 of the states and territories. Like we understand, like the work is taking the toll and our systems aren't like what they used to be, or our systems are like what they used to be and they weren't what our students need, nor the staff who are sacrificing every day. And like you said so much, Corey, I was just completely enamored, and then I realized there's a camera on me at the same time. I think we should come back to that mental health literacy conversation. But like the reality is, like the structures and systems that are designed to support our students and our educators, I think they were exposed as being woefully inadequate. At least some of the things that we've been trying to work on here in the state of Pennsylvania a little bit. We started to work on trying to provide educators, teams with something that we call compassion resilience. Reality is like compassion resilience in and of itself is the antithesis of compassion fatigue. And we understand compassion fatigue is for a range of different things. Like compassion fatigue are the ingredients of things like the secondary trauma that many of us face on a daily basis, well before there ever was a pandemic. It's things like burnout because there's not adequate support for us to do the many different roles and responsibilities that are provided for us. And in addition to that, there's attacks as we continue to be strained in so many different ways. But in the same way that we understand, like our education system has really, like its design has promoted almost all of these conditions, we can be intentional about designing conditions and systems in schools to build compassion resilience, to build support for educators as they continue to do the work. There's one thing you can drop in the chat, the compassion resilience toolkit. This could be one thing that school counselors can take lead in and partner with their administrators and central administration teams to lead school systems into being a compassion resilient system. And because we understand like compassion resilience in education, like that's something where we can like actually design space where we can maintain our physical or emotional and our mental health well-being, while at the same time having dignity and being able to identify the stressors for learning, some of that mental health literacy that I think that Corey had noted before. And as we're addressing these barriers for our students and for our staff, we can look into our communities, those partnerships that we talked before with the caregivers and parents as well, and be able to identify them and give them voice and also connect them with the necessary supports. And if we really can be intentional about designing these systems, both to identify, to prevent, it can minimize compassion fatigue. And these are things that we can, again, design. When we talk about some of these other things that we can design in addition to that, like one is just managing our time. And we were talking about this half joking, but I would love to talk about one good use of time, which has been my most favorite toy right now, is ChatGPT. And so ChatGPT is a generative AI. If any of you out there were in my Ask Us session over the summer in Austin, we highlight a lot of AI tools that are really great. There are tools out there that can help you to write form letters and informational memos, emails, and you just have to either drag in a website, hit the big themes, and it'll write it for you. And ChatGPT does all that much better than anything I've used before. Like the reality is you can write something like, write an informational letter to parents on FAFSA and sit there and watch, and it's going to write an informational letter for FAFSA, which I believe is one of those. There are a range of different tools. I just toying around, I wrote letters of recommend, I didn't, Chat GPT did. Wrote letters of recommendation, 504s, 2 movie scripts and a TV script, and a really inappropriate joke that I thought was kind of funny. It scolded me to try and write a Yo Mama haiku. But I thought, but there is such a range of uses that it would be fun to toy around. I think without question, generative AI like this is a very powerful time-saving tool when it comes to providing informational items. Think that you're already going to be spending 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, and a couple of you who are going to write and rewrite the same thing over and over again, like 45 minutes. It can do it in a couple of minutes, just you need to type in the big themes, and it can do it for you. For some of these things that really are our synthesis, our professionalism, our interpretation is very valuable to the experience, like letters of recommendation, like 504s or something like that. No, clearly we should not be using that as a tool for it, but it can provide you a meaningful guide for things like summarizing your notes, summarizing the research out there for best practice, providing quick informational guides out there. It can, frankly, you can write a vegetarian or vegan menu for a week. Now please transform this into a shopping list, and it'll do that for you in less than 2 minutes. Like, there are plenty of great tools for your personal life. This is definitely a hack that can help to speed up times to ease some of those burdens out there.
Steve, I love that. I haven't got on there and really played with it, but I just now was thinking, I was like, well, what am I going to make for dinner? Maybe I'm going to have to get onto that list. And pull that out. And so that's a great tool. I think that does really start to decrease the mental stressors that educators are facing. Anything that we can do to reduce those things that take time away from the things that we need to do will definitely benefit ourselves and ultimately benefit our students. And one of our next big ideas that will really help support students is around increasing their involvement and engagement on campuses. And I'd love to hear from Monica. I know Monica's in the elementary space, but also has been working K-12 on other ideas on how we increase student engagement that drives better outcomes for them and helps educators and counselors specifically create systems that work for them. And so, Monica, how is it that you're driving up engagement or involvement on your campus?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing to think about with this is that sometimes it starts with the adults on campus, because the kids on campus have to feel safe. They have to feel like it's a place where they can be creative, where they can get involved. And if there's a culture that's not happening, then we have to work first on the adults in the building to ensure that kids have that safe space to be able to get involved. And then past that, I think the next big theme with this is listening to them and hearing their voices, having spaces to have just like a little meeting or club or an organization to just say, hey, what is it that you would like to see happen around the school? We're doing a week of respect. What are some activities that you would like to see us do this week? How can you help us to do those activities? There's different programs and organizations. My schools in the past have used No Place for Hate, which is not listed, but it's one that deals with a lot of DEI work. So helping kids to feel like no matter what backgrounds and things you're coming from. So it's a lot of collaboration with students, with staff, to really get them engaged and feel like they're part of the whole, because whatever activities we're doing, they're the big piece of making it work. So I think, when we're discussing what we're doing, we bring those student voices in, because as we bring their voices in, they start to feel more connected to the schools, and then they bring their friends along, who bring their friends along, and so on and so forth, as you keep that longevity. And then Steve, I will pass to you to talk about our Black Lives Matter at School and our attendance playbook.
Yeah, I mean, there are a range of different things too when we talk about engaging students, and particularly a chance to share our identity and celebrate students' identity is something that I think we as counselors are uniquely equipped to do. One unique opportunity is we understand that Black Lives Matter at School Week is the same week as National School Counseling Week. And I think there are a lot of great intersections with them. For those of you who are not familiar, like Black Lives Matter at School Week it's a national coalition focusing on justice and education. And these are educators, students, parents, unions, community organizers, all focusing on bringing and elevating conversations in the first week. Like, some of these things are like things that we as counselors actually advocate for and support: ending zero tolerance discipline and being instrumental in providing restorative justice, hiring more diverse educators into the field to support all of our students. In addition to that, having a diverse curriculum that reflects the background of many of our students. And then in addition to that, funding counselors, not cops, because we understand that our students more often than not are showing up into schools disproportionately with law enforcement than with mental health professionals like school counselors, who can provide some of that support. The Black Lives Matter Week at School is a way to engage a wide range of students, not just Black and Brown, with some very unique opportunities, whether it be through writing, listening, or exposing them to the wide range of opportunities at like HBCUs as well. And can be a unique way to pair some of the activities we're already doing, celebrate our profession, and also showing how our profession is transforming education to support all students. But the reality is that some of our students will continue to be pushed out, will continue to have difficulty engaging in education. Like, we understand when you're looking at the national data that we were in an attendance crisis well before we ever entered the pandemic. And since then, it's gone exponentially worse. The attendance playbook can be one of those first steps to understand what are some of the evidence-based practices that your school can administer to support students to get into every seat every day. And whether it be things like simple mailing, parent engagement strategies, or again, school strategies to shift climate and culture to welcome students, there are a lot of different resources in the attendance playbook that can help to support you when it comes to working with students and their families.
And Kat, you've been doing some work as well around this, and I'd love to get your perspective on how, what resources are really available to engage students.
Yeah, and I think many a times we forget that we exist on our campuses because students are there. And I think many times if you've never worked in education, I think it's always one of those where students fill your cup and take from your cup sometimes at the same time. And I don't know in any other profession that happens. And I think, how do we actually do this intentionally so that it's done through an access and equity lens so that every student on our campus has opportunities? And so, one of my roles on my campus was also the student leadership teacher. And that really just helped me gain perspective about what does it look like for students to be involved on our campuses. I think now that I'm where I'm at in my profession, a lot of times things feel like they're done at kids instead of with them. And how do we provide spaces for what that looks like? And so when I use the term student agency in this, these are just some of the ideas that we've gathered over the years here. Student agency is that umbrella for voice and choice. So what does that look like on our campuses? And then which leads to how are students engaging in their own curriculum and the engagement of schools inside and outside through academics, extracurriculars, fine art programs, and things of that nature. And then how do we actually provide opportunities or help students feel like they actually own pieces of this? And one of the things that I find really interesting is like, how do we actually co-create with our students? What does that actually look like, particularly when it comes from the lens of the curriculum from the school counselor? Because we're literally going into classrooms or small groups, helping them gain that knowledge. So can we do that together with them? And so I tend to use this table for me as a reflective tool to say, where are we doing really great at? And maybe where can we grow at, and what's missing from these bullet points here? So just some ideas for all of us to think about and then bring back to our campuses and advocate that we have student voice and choice, that we have engagement opportunities, and we have ownership opportunities for our students, because I feel like this is an overarching piece of belonging and engagement on our campuses, is that students are actively involved in what they're doing.
Yeah, and like I really can't stress what Kat's saying enough, and I really want to take some time to really highlight that. Partnering to elevate student voice and choice is not just something that's best for our students. I'm saying very clearly it's best for our education system right now. We understand like there are unprecedented attacks when it comes to educators and how we are supporting students in schools. At least in some of the work that we've been doing here in Pennsylvania with Campaign for Our Shared Future, which does things like public messaging and polling to understand effective messaging. We understand that the people who are most instrumental in having effective messaging about the outcomes and work in schools are two specific groups, three groups: parents, students. They're the most powerful group, and educators working with students and families like school counselors. So any chance that we can work with our students to both be empowered in schools in many different ways, capture that narrative and elevate that, those are some things that are going to safeguard education from the many different attacks that we see legislatively and in different ways as well.
Yeah, and we also know we're not the only ones that have knowledge on how to do this really well. So we'd love the audience, if you could, you're equally experts in this space. If you could, drop this in the chat for us, a response to this idea. What is one way that you involve students on your campus to increase involvement and engagement? These will be shared and you can share them with others. So go ahead and take your time, type it out. We're going to keep moving along. We'll call them back out, but we really do value what you have to say, and we know others will as well.
Yeah.
I was typing out an idea and I was responding to the student preference surveys. Regina, that's a really interesting idea. And I think now what I'm thinking here is the big question, right? Like funding. How do we find funding to do some of the things that we need to do on our campuses? And what might that look like? Where do we go and find this piece? And Steve, would love to get your initial thoughts here on where you have found some of the funding and some of the resources that you pull to make this happen on your campuses.
Right, this is very secret. Couch cushions. No, but what we understand is like the most important strategy is one that we just discussed. And that's very important. It is to work with your students to understand their experience and elevate that experience and capture those narratives, both in data and qualitatively with those shared narratives. Those are, again, our biggest advocacy tools and could be some of the biggest tools to draw in and connect to necessary funding as well. there is, without a doubt, unprecedented funding since the start of the profession coming into education and supporting the work of school counselors right now. And that's something that we need to recognize. Things like your small group, your close the gap action plans and narrow close the gap action plans could be actually decisive things that, as you have very clear goals and are collecting data to, could actually have be the evidence to support your school receiving necessary grant funding as well. One of my biggest recommendations, if you go to www.schoolsafety.gov, it's a really good one-stop shop to either find and access a wide range of federal, state, and local grants, or in addition to that, understand some of the language, information, and data that they're looking for, or be connected to other resources and evidence-based practices that you can provide for your students and possibly use as a magnet for your school district to receive those monies as well. Any of these things, again, if you're understanding the work for your students and able to capture that narrative, both with data and information and in their story, something that we as counselors are trained to do, these are going to be unique opportunities to plug funding in either directly to your program or to your school system, which betters your program all at the same time, and also points to the value of your comprehensive school counseling program.
Yeah, Steve, I love that. And to be honest, we've probably run on a shoestring budget for a long time in education, and now we have this surplus, but the surplus eventually is going to come to some sort of winding down to some degree. And so how can school counselors really be able to learn as much as they possibly can about where to find these dollars and actually how do they actually utilize them in an effective way? We've kind of thrown these 5 tips out there, and Steve recommended a great site. But one way to start thinking about as you prepare heading into next year to start funding your other supports or your other programs or continuing those programs is to see what grants were already released in previous years. Not all those end up being funded for the next year. It's a good indication of what's out there. Equally important, what's really cool is that the federal government releases a forecasting grant list. And so we're going to drop that into the chat below there for you. That really shows what grants will be coming that they anticipate in the coming months, in the coming years. So take a look at that. Also start reaching out to your state Department of Ed. They usually have some form of grant listserv that they're emailing regularly to make sure you're on that and getting the most up-to-date information that's coming out from your state. There's also probably people in your district around your title director or CFO of some kind, or anyone that might be receiving funding information like your principal. Would be a good place to just connect and say, hey, I'm interested in learning more. And the last piece is really thinking about new legislation at the state level. Legislators pass a lot of state bills every year, and paying attention to those. Sometimes those are unfunded mandates, which we're used to, but other times there's actually dollars associated with them, and oftentimes ways to pilot new innovative ways to support students. And a lot of that is around mental health and social emotional learning right now.
You know what, and thank you for both of you for speaking into that. And I think it leads us into our idea number 6 here, is I think sometimes the funding goes hand in hand with initiatives or literacy or resources that we have on our campuses to do the work that we need to do. And Steve, I'm wondering, you know, professionally, what resources, what do you do, you know, maybe on a yearly or a monthly basis to increase your literacy around mental health for you specifically and the other educators or adults on your campuses?
Yeah, I mean, like when we talk about a few different things, particularly like comprehensive suicide prevention, we understand like mental health literacy is one of the primary tools, both for students and for adults. Here in Pennsylvania, we have something known as Act 71. So we've had, specifically when it comes to depression and suicide awareness, we've had mental health literacy part of our professional development regimen on an annual basis for about the past 6 years. We understand that like mental health literacy is really important. It's a key equity tool because more often than not, particularly for many of our students, their behavior is going to be maligned as being oppositional or violent, and having a lens of understanding student mental health and student behavior through a lens of mental health can be one of our key advocacy and key equity tools. Like how we do it is a few different ways through standard professional development. We've seen a wide range, either in our team meetings, providing consultation and coaching for teachers. My most recent administrators, they've been doing a really great job when it comes to teacher coaching as well, when it comes to student mental health as well. That's something to be celebrated as well. But really trying to take the shift of saying like we can be a culture of caring, and that promotes an orderly culture than saying an orderly culture at the expense of care and compassion for our students. These are going to be very distinct shifts, but they aren't that difficult. We understand there are a few different things, like if we're better able to identify students at risk for mental health by equipping all of our educators to be aware of the signs and symptoms of mental health concerns, that helps us to get students plugged into supports in a strained mental health system sooner. In addition to that, it improves our school climate and culture, because rather than reacting in volatility or trying to put all of our attention in supporting the system, we can actually support the students in there. And it also reduces some of the stigma associated with access to care as well. One of my biggest concerns absolutely at the end is like education systems by necessity need to become mental health literate systems right now, because we just saw right now in a Gallup poll, the number one cause of dropout for students right now is no longer financial issues, it's stress. Our students are not graduating healthy enough to maintain a higher ed system where we have lost at this point 1.3 million students. That's saying like all the Dakotas, or pick a New England state as a college dropout. That starts in the K-12 system, and we can build those systems of care for our students. And the one way is equipping all of our educators to be a network of caring.
Yeah, Steve, I think that's really it. And we form a giant network of professionals across the country as school counselors. And Monica, I know you've equally served in the role of past president of the Nevada School Counseling Association, and you're an active school counselor there. And I'm just curious, how can we really utilize National School Counseling Week as a springboard for advocacy for all the things that we've just been talking about, whether it's mental health literacy, whether it be supporting the well-being of adults, whether it be developing community partnerships, and bring student voice and choice. How do we use this week to really sell not just the profession, but the work that's absolutely necessary to make student outcomes a realization?
I think there's a couple of things that we can do. Even though we like to be celebrated and appreciated, National School Counseling Week really is a week for us to advocate about our roles in our professions and what we're doing. And so one thing that our counseling department here has been doing the last couple of years, which I really love, is they will send us a little like they'll send us 4 slides on like a Google slide, and they will, they're always themed to whatever the theme is for the year. And so they will say things like, I'm all in, like when it was all in Vegas, I'm all in for kids because I'm all in for faculty, my staff, because I'm all in for community partners. And we fill out the rest, and then we post our pictures or our Bitmojis or whatever, make it our own. And then it's a great tool to post all over social media. So mine were all over my Twitter account, all on my Facebook. I was sharing all of my friends that I saw that was posted. So it's not just about here's what I'm doing. It's also about just here's what other people are doing in the profession. I think being able to highlight the great things that we're doing around our school, around our the profession. Like my school knew when I was president of Nevada School Counselor Association, because I made sure it was known, right? Like I'm out here doing these advocating tools, and then I was speaking at events and doing these other things just to make sure that our name is out there. So it's a great week for us to really throw out the data of what we're doing in our schools. Hey, did you know I've done this many groups? I've done this many lessons. I've impacted this many students across this many topics. And it doesn't have to be something that we're spending a lot of money on, right? Like don't go out and think you have to spend hundreds of dollars to figure out how to advocate for yourself. But what are the small, like little things you can put out in your teacher's lounge or hanging on your door somewhere around your door as ways to just let your staff, your students, the parents that flow in and out of your schools know what you're doing to advocate.
Yeah, and Kat, what are some ways that a counselor might be able to take action right away? We got just a few weeks from now that we're going to be celebrating school counselors.
Yeah, I think the proactive nature sometimes is a gift. Right here we have some really engaged school counselors who are really truly making systemic changes in our communities and thinking about what is one thing that I can do? And I think that was always the piece, is like, okay, what are we going to do differently this year? And for me, I think some of our strongest advocates are our own school buildings ourselves, and making sure that people understand and align with the role of the school counselor. And so as Monica was speaking into that, we were always, as a department, thinking about how can we shine the light on the crucial role that the school counseling department has on the school. Just because we don't have a classroom space where students go to every single day. And so the appreciation for teachers to let them know the crucial collaborative efforts on our campuses is so appreciated and needed. And so thinking about how can we intertwine appreciation and advocacy together. I would always encourage my students to come with me to our school board meeting the week prior, if it happened, or the week of, and have them speak on behalf of school counselors or school counseling week. I would help them fill out the yellow slip. And so just, again, how can we involve students with letting them know the important role, or how people who, school counselors who have impacted their life on our campus. And so those are just some of the ideas right now that I've been literally taking notes as Steve and Monica and you have been talking through this. Like, okay, what can we do different this February coming up to advocate and appreciate in the same way?
Yeah, absolutely. And that sort of brings us to a final, question for the audience. So another opportunity to engage. We've heard a lot of ideas, and some of these ideas feel big and they feel like they might be something that can't happen overnight, but there are things we can take actionable steps to achieve. And so in the chat, what's one thing that you're going to do next to transform your school counseling program? Maybe it's something that you heard from Monica. Maybe it's something you heard from Steve. Maybe Kat spurred an idea. What's some nugget you're going to take back and really hold on to take the next step to transform your program? We'd love to hear it in the chat. Drop it down, might spur someone else to action as well.
Steve, do you have plans? Do you have your week planned out so far? Are you still kind of sorting out what y'all gonna do?
Yeah, right now I need to, after we're done here, go out and feed my sled dogs, and then I need to mush home.
And how does that help you advocate for school counseling week?
Well, no, actually, we're right now, our staff are coordinating a series of videos for all the different National School Counseling Week to celebrate and tell the story of the work that we're doing with students right now. So I'm really excited about that.
And Monica, do you have some specific plans, or are they still working themselves out too?
We are still working ourselves out. I've been on a lot of trainings and haven't sat down to figure it out, but I'm excited this year because I have a practicum student. So we'll definitely make sure that it's out there, the great things that we're doing here.
Yeah, I feel like, Corey, we've got some great people being courageous in the chat here about how we're gonna take an action, right? We're gonna be actively engaged and take a nugget from this training and put it into action in our schools and buildings.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the one that just came in from Laura, was talking about pivoting back to a focus on tier 1. Gosh, that's so important right now. I think we've forgotten all the things that used to serve us really well during that pandemic, and that's now returning to them and then boosting them back up with greater efficacy.
Gosh, Pennsylvania's showing up strong, Steve. That's Laura's, from your state. We're gonna wind down and see if there are any burning questions. And as we do that, we have some opportunities. If you all are interested in joining the Character Strong team, we have some what we call school culture training opportunities for you all to attend. These are dynamic full day trainings that you and your staff can come to. I would highly encourage, if this is something you are interested in, definitely bring your building administrator with you. We're really talking about how do we increase belonging, well-being, engagement in our classrooms and our whole buildings, and school counselors are perfectly positioned to do this work. So if one of these dates works out for you, Corey and I would love to see you at one of them. And we have some really great opportunities coming up through Character Strong later on this month into February and March. We have our leadership curriculum demo next week, and we will be celebrating National School Counseling Week, dropping in an entire toolkit of school counselor resources, including a school counselor self-care calendar. So be on the lookout for that from us. We are going to be talking about Tier 2, the small group curriculum, on February 2nd. So definitely up your alley if that's something to look at. And then, of course, how do we adapt and help our students who are struggling for February 9th, and then March 1st, we have our last webinar about taking on Tier 1 and 2 at the same time. Is it even possible? So these are free resources and webinars that are coming up. And we just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. What an amazing opportunity to share from Monica and Steve and to learn from you. Corey, thank you for your insights, and thank you for joining us today and giving us an hour of your time. We are forever grateful for the work that school counselors and student support services people play on our campuses. You are needed more now than ever. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we appreciate it. We hope you have a great day, and best of luck and fun celebrating National School Counseling Week in a couple weeks. Bye.
See you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining.
Visitors.